for a decade at least, maybe two, it's in vogue to figure that those services that we buy, like this building, or arts and culture, or policing, or whatever it is, health care, heritage, all that money we put into making ourselves proud of who we are, all that, that's all government, and it's too expensive. If I'm right, and what we are is our most valuable resource, then you can perceive every nickel that you folks have invested in your community as an investment with a return, a definable return by a bond dealer or an investment dealer. You can define the return on the investments in yourselves in wealth coming back to yourselves, and the people who say those collective decisions we make through governments like the regional district and town council and stuff to spend money here, those are the things we can no longer afford. I would say, on the contrary, we could not afford not to continue to make this place what it is. The risk is a little harder to define. I was at a meeting of the tribal council of the 5 southeastern BC bands and a couple of years ago, and the tribal council had a guest speaker from the Okanagan, and he came from a Shuswap band to come and talk about tourism, and he'd had a lot of experience. His band was involved in various tourism activities, and he came there in a 3-piece suit, and he got up in front of the meeting and he said, I wore this suit because I thought it would give you guys an opening target so we could get right into the conversation. And he said, yeah, it's true. You start to make money from tourism, then you can start to expect some of the people in your community to wear different clothes, and all of the symbols of what you imagine are possible destructive action in your community based on the tourism industry, as destructive perhaps as any other industry you can name. But he said, if I can quote him correctly, he said, sell your product and protect your culture. Never ever get your culture confused with your product. I thought that perhaps because he had more at risk than my community did, he'd figured it out a whole lot faster than sometimes our community does. I think it is possible to define our product, to bring people here, to see it, to take it home with them, to pay bucks for it, and not to mess with the very thing that they are looking to find when they come here. I guess I got a couple more stories to tell you. The first one is about, people here know what the cargo cults were? Mm-hmm. You want to tell a story? In 1980 or 82, I don't remember, and those of you who were here and active in those days, Marty might remember. I can't remember the name of the guy, but I was on the regional district at the time, and of course we were unraveling. Louisiana Pacific left town from Salmo, and there was nobody to sell white pine to, and KFP left town, and there was nobody to sell plywood blocks to, and T&H, and all these people, all these names that mean nothing to so many, but they were plants that maintained economies in what we used to think was the nature of our economy here in the West Kootenai. And I responded with visceral anger. It made me mad that somebody was taking apart what I understood to be us, town by town. And the regional district of Central Kootenai hired this guy, Rick Careless, that was his name, and he did a economic analysis of a business plan, sort of what we should do now. Like, this was 15 years ago, and he was looking forward to what he thought we should be in 1994, and he wrote it all down. And he brought it in, and he said, it's not about boards and ore and trains. He said it's about arts and culture and education. And Boy, I was mad. I moved a motion. I moved a motion that we don't pay him. I'm pretty sure I kept him from getting paid until some statutory period ran out and I lost. That's my introduction to the story of the cargo cults. My dad died a while ago in a place called Micronesia, that's the islands between Japan and the Philippines, sort of bordered at the bottom by Australia, a long ways away. Guam, Guadalcanal, all those islands that whose names got famous in war are there, and there's about 10,000 of them grouped together in a place called Micronesia, which was run as a trust territory of the UN for many years. Anyway, the story goes that during the war, the Japanese figured out that they needed these islands because they were halfway to where they had to get, and they needed to fill their planes up with fuel, so they had to take over these islands first. So before there was ever war, they went and they took over all the flat land and built places to land their planes. And indigenous people who lived on those islands lived on the flat land, as anybody would. It's close to the water and easy to grow. And so they were displaced from the Japanese taking over their land, and they moved up the hill. But up the hill, it's tough to get to the water, and it's tough to grow your crops, and you're on the side of the mountain, and they began to get hungry. And then the Americans came, and the Americans, of course, couldn't land at the bottom of the mountain without losing their whole army, because at the bottom of the mountain was the Japanese. So they parachuted into the top of the mountain and set up little camps and prepared themselves to try to attack the Japanese from within. Well, this is a long time before Vietnam and helicopters and all, and in order to feed the Americans, they used to fly over with bombers and open the bottom and just let the food go, and the clothes go, and the tools go. And so these people, these indigenous people who had been displaced by the Japanese and were now living on the mountainside, they found that once every week or so, these guys would fly over, and the belly of the thing would open up, and out would come everything you ever wanted and had never seen before. And of course, the Americans didn't want the Japanese to know that, what was going on, and so it was useful to them to sort of pay off these people who were living around the camp to make them friendly so they wouldn't become their enemies. And so it went on until, because of events all over the world, the war came to an end. And the Japanese were gone. And then one day the Americans walked down to the bottom of the mountain and got onto boats, and they left too. And here was these people. And they stood around the openings where the Americans had been camped, and they waited. And nothing happened. And they waited, and they got hungry. And then they got together and they said, okay, we're getting hungry, and this thing is, we're in a jam here, what should we do? And they did what I think is a fairly logical thing. They took the junk that they found from the war, and they brought it together, and they began to build the god. And they built the shape of that thing that used to fly over, and its belly would open and out would come the food. And they thought if they put this deity out in the middle of the opening, it would attract its kind, and they would come back and feed the people. They got the thing built and they put it out there, and it was only after that sort of raggedy, almost pathetic, quasi-religious period that they kind of decided that maybe the prophets and the seers were less useful than the practical people, and gave up on trying to attract the free, what they had come to know, and walked back down to the bottom of the mountain and started growing food and doing things that they understood. I think my response in 1982 to Rick Careless's report was kind of like those folks whose food had been taken away. I thought that if we ranted and raved against the closing of the industrial plant, that we could make them come back, and if we held up our hands against the coming of the electronic age, that we could deny it. And of course it wasn't true. What I think this is about, and even politicians can learn, I hope, what I think the changes in me are about, is all of us coming to understand that we aren't going to make it like that anymore. There isn't going to be a $16 an hour job for every one of our children pulling boards or pulling zinc. we are going to find a way to make a living here because here is here and not because somebody owes us something. And I thank all of you for teaching me that. See you later.
Thanks, Corky. And I see our time is up for this evening. No, actually, I'm grateful to have what we're all here about tonight put into such eloquent words. And now moving on to some of the more pragmatic parts of the evening where everybody will be timed, and I have a small hook underneath the desk, and if you're more than 2 minutes, I'll pull it out. No, it's not quite like that. We're very fortunate in Nelson Area 2020 to have the Johnson Group team supporting this project, and that is Bill and Lorraine Johnson and Linda Barker Johnson and Dinah Stanley and Nick Ross. They're all part of the team helping support this project and making sure we get the outcomes that we're looking for. And so right now I'd like to introduce Lorraine to come up and talk about what we're going to be doing for the rest of the evening.
Thank you for coming, everyone. I just want to say quickly how much fun it's been working with all of you. And I'm very pleased that there are new people here as well who couldn't be part of the first phase of this process in the fall and are joining us now, and thank you for coming. It's a perfect time to be here. I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen tonight. The presenters are going to have 2 or 3 minutes to talk about their issues that were identified by the subcommittees working all fall. The subcommittees are now disbanded, and you are all free agents now. You may choose the focus group that you're most interested in, that you would like to help craft and design a strategy for the future for Nelson, areas E and area F, and to be part of that and to put your stamp on it and your personal impression on the strategy and action plans that are going to go forward. The focus groups will work through, I imagine, 3 to 6 weeks. We're hoping to have it all finished by March 1st. Some of the strategies will take a little longer, some will be quite fast. In fact, if anything, it was like holding back horses through this whole process because everyone wanted to go straight into the strategy and not stick with the issues. And even writing the issues that they're going to present tonight, it was really difficult because solutions kept coming up and ideas kept coming up. So I think this process will go very quickly. The strategies will then go to our steering committee for review. The steering committee will identify any gaps, anything we've missed, and try to fill those in. You're also welcome to tell us at any time if there are gaps or you want other strategies or other issues to be addressed. And then they will finally gather them together in a draft plan, and we will distribute that to all of you to look at and make any changes or refinements or comments. After that, we will take a final draft to the public. So sometime in March, probably the end of March, we'll call you all back with the final draft and all of the strategies and all of the action plans, and we'll invite all of our politicians back. I'm just delighted they're here tonight at this point in the process, that they care about what we're doing. We're just absolutely thrilled that they're listening to us because this is a grassroots effort. And there are going to be some dynamic results come out. Some of them even free, I think, Josh. So to reiterate tonight what we're going to do, we're going to listen to the presenters. At the end of it, if you can stay through the whole thing, I hope you can, and we'll move quickly. We'll ask you to go up and sign up for the issue or issues, focus groups you want to work on, put your name and your phone number, then stay around for a few more minutes. Decide who of those people you would like as your contact person. This is not a leader, this is not a spokesperson, just someone we can contact. And decide when you can meet. Now we have booked this room tentatively Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, noon for 2 hours. Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, thank you, Linda. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 2 hours at noon, 2 hours, 7 to 9 at night. And we can have 4 groups at once in here. So you can decide when you want to meet. I would say plan for 3 meetings anyway, 3 or 4 meetings. And you go over to Linda at her table, and she has all of the calendars, and she'll sign you up. Now, it may be that you want to start meeting in each other's homes, but if you could just meet your first meeting here, we will give you a package with guidelines and help you through the process. Linda's been doing all of the research. She has handed out that booklet that's sort of an umbrella stat booklet, and she is also assigned to work with each of the focus groups for whatever research you need to pull together. So we'll help you all we can along the process, but this will be masterminded and written by you. So, on with the show. Thanks.
Thanks, Lorraine. And now I'd like to bring up steering committee spokespeople for each of the 3 subcommittees. And so that's Gwen Akers representing, excuse me, the social community, Wendy Barham for the physical community, and Maureen Gardner for community economic viability. And they will be introducing the people who are presenting. And again, I suggest that it is about 8 o'clock, and some people can only stay till 9. There are about 20 people who are going to present. If you can please keep to the most important points that people would need to know if they would want to be interested in joining that particular focus group. And then they will also be able to identify you to speak with you during that moment of chaos when we all run around and sort of find each other by the wall.
Thanks, Ruth. Good evening, honored guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I'll stand on my tippy toes. My name is Gwen Akers, and I am the representative from the Nelson and District Chamber of Commerce, which is a very active organization in our community and has about 280 members. I have been involved with the first phase of the Nelson and District Model Sustainable Community Project, and this, as you've been told, is the second phase, the Sustainable Development Strategy, and now called Nelson Area 2020. The Social Community Focus Group, which I've been very active in, has met many times and has been well attended by a core group of people. With the Social Community Group, please take a moment and stand so that we can all see who you are. Come on, Andrew and Aroka, and there they are. Thanks. We as the Social Community Group identified subject areas of attention to maintain sustainability. This, I feel, was done with a good deal of sensitivity, communication, education, and good old-fashioned hard work. We did a good job of addressing the social principles and not allowing our personalities or personal agendas to dominate or change the direction of the group. Our Social Community Group members are very diverse in their beliefs, whether social, economic, environment, or political issues. Some of the group members are brand new to our community, some have been here for a few years, and some are fourth-generation residents. We are educators, social workers, entrepreneurs, office workers, and retirees. We basically do not agree on many things. However, we all have one thing in common, and that is a love of this community and a wish for it to remain livable. It seems to me that this is the reason we have not had any major disagreements, but have listened, communicated, and treated each other with respect. These may sound like simple things, but these to me are the major components for sustainability of our community. And I really believe it, and I mean it with all my heart. The subject areas the Social Community Group has identified are: number 1, governance and developing partnerships; 2, diversity and housing; 3, community safety; 4, mobility, transportation; 5, education; 6, arts and culture. And she didn't use the hook. Thank you.
All right, so you're going to stay up there.
Okay.
Thanks, Gwen. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Barham. I guess if Gwen had to stand her toes, I'll have to stand on a chair here.
Yeah, I'm a techno-peasant, but, oh, just pulls?
Oh, great. I've been a member of the steering committee right since the very beginning of this project. I'm also now on the physical subcommittee, although I guess after tonight it's no longer in existence. But the physical subcommittee has been working on a lot of issues that I think will find are very key to sustainability. And we think our issues are very important, so we're going to be trying to talk everyone into working with us. Everyone on the committee has come from a very diverse background. We have people who have experience in forestry and biology and city planning and recycling and just a wide science background, hydrology, all types of things. So we have a lot of people with a lot of knowledge to help work on these issues. But even with our combined knowledge and energy, we are still really anxious to have people from the Health and Social Committee and from the Economic Committee to work together with us. Because I think the only way we're going to come up with strategic plans that are really going to work is if we look at it from a holistic point of view and take everybody's point of view in together. So I won't make the physical subcommittee stand up here because it's going to get too confusing. It's going to take too much time. I'm also not going to bother listing all our issues. We had so many of them, we ended up having to vote on some of them. And decide which were sort of the top 7 that we wanted to work on. You'll see a lot of them listed along the side here. So I think I'll just turn it over to Maureen Gardner and get this show on the road here.
Hi, my name's Maureen Gardner and I'm the Economic Development Officer for Nelson and Area ZNF. The Economic Development Commission has been thrilled to participate in a process like this. Particularly an interest, of course, is to look at the economic viability of Nelson and area. And there's so many different arguments and discussions about what direction it may be that Nelson should take. We're very keen to see a strategy or several strategies come from this process that will guide us as we look at where we can go in the future. And I'm sure that that's of benefit to the whole community. The economic viability sector or subcommittee was also made up of a wide variety of people. We had business people, we had people from the resource sector, from the government sector, we had a writer, we had an educator, we had a publisher, and many more. We were very involved in trying to identify some of the issues that we thought would be of interest to address in the context of sustainability. Some of those issues we had a hard time also. We had so many, it was very difficult for us to select, so we also had a bit of a voting and prioritization process. But the issues that we decided we wanted to focus on were business, small and medium-sized business, arts and culture, health and alternative health, natural resources, including forestry, mining, and agriculture, the development of new sectors of the economy and non-traditional sectors, outdoor recreation and tourism, education and training, and financial, non-market, and the retirement sector. I will ask my committee to stand, those of you who are here. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to Wendy, I guess, and we'll start talking about some of these issues. Wendy, do you want to introduce?
The first issue that we're going to talk about tonight is governance, and Bruce Halstead from the Nelson City Police will be presenting this.
Indeed, it's a pleasure to hear the politicians talk as they did, because that is our focus, and it was very interesting to hear some of their comments about being able to work together and as a unit, and we really and truly are one community, even though we have various branches of government. And that was the main focus of our issue of governance. To have a sustainable community, it is paramount that areas EF and the city work together as one community, and keeping the public informed is the key to the success of this. We believe the issues in governance must be examined and, where applicable, implemented, changed, or streamlined as these issues directly influence all subcommittees and the overall outcome of the Sustainable Community Project. It may be required to consolidate or reduce some functions in government to assist in removing some of the bureaucracy, either real or perceived, as what people feel about a process is as important as the process itself. We've listed the following issues in no particular order to focus on for this project: cooperation, education, financial. I'm glad to hear Josh say he's got a pocket full of money. Look at the area as a whole rather than your own section. In other words, think globally. Focus on what works for us in this community, how to show a vision, how to be a leader as community leaders. Long-range planning, 1, 3, 5, etc., your goals that are clearly spelled out to the public. How can community participation assist elected officials? How can people get involved with positive input rather than negativism? We hear so many times criticisms. It's easy to criticize, but we want groups that are going to add something positive, and action is important. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Sean Dwyer to discuss the business issue.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say briefly, we started out on the Economic Committee to talk about issues, and we listed a lot of those, like value added and import replacement, diversity. We also found ourselves talking about sectors all the time. That's our traditional way of thinking about economic activity, I guess, and it was easier to consider the whole arena in that way. So what we ended up doing is, rather than suggest issues for focus groups that would look at each sector in terms of that issue, we've ended up suggesting focus groups on sectors that will look at a number of issues within each sector. So I'm to introduce the business sector, what we called the small and medium-sized business and home-based business sector. The small business sector has been a source of diversity and stability in this economy of the area for years. It's part of what helped us survive the closure of DTUC and the mill. When one small business goes out of business, it's still there's a lot more to take up the slack, and it's a way to generate a lot of activity. There's a lot of potential in the sector for sustainable economic activity, to develop new businesses, home-based businesses, import replacement to find out what is being purchased in the area and whether it can be supplied locally by small business. Value-added businesses in the resource industries and the information industries can be looked at in this category. And because they're mostly capitalized locally, the money circulates more locally, and they have a higher multiplier effect and reduce leakages from the local economy. The sector would benefit from a strategy because it has so many players in it and they don't know who each other are and what their common needs are. So any survey of the area, even that just identified all the small businesses in one place, maybe combining some of the directories that have already been done or filling them out, would allow them to form new alliances and to and do joint marketing, to lobby for changes in legislation, governance, to improve city services so the sector can prosper more, meet their training needs, and deal with their waste and recycling issues. And there's also, especially in this area, possibilities in the non-market, non-money economy to develop and supplement small businesses. So it's a diverse sector with a lot of players that could really do with an action plan that emphasizes the sustainability of their various businesses. So I hope we'll get a few people to sign up for that group. Thanks.
Now Andrew Earnshaw will us a report from our group on housing.
I'm actually going to cheat. I'm going to wear another little hat quickly. As a representative of all of you, thanks to the steering committee, about a community forum about what acts with these policy proposals. And this is a forum that a bunch of community groups are putting on. And this group is one of them. You are all one of them, though you probably don't know it, a lot of you. Anyway, this is a flyer that talks all about it. I'm just going to hand it back, take one, photocopy them, post them all over your office. I think it's a really interesting topic. And it will affect the sustainability of this community in a big way if you think about the government we have in this community already. So, it's all right. To break the
Thanks.
What's that?
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks. There are some more copies of that flyer at the front desk if you'd like to grab a couple on the way out. Okay. So, now the housing hat. Basically, the title of the presentation I'd like to give is that diversity in housing is a prerequisite for sustainable community. I hope you'll excuse the word sustainable. A community that consists of a variety of individuals is a vibrant community. It will collectively have the wisdom required to meet the challenges of a changing world. And that's what we'd like you to think of when you think about housing. The goal is to have a community with a lot of variety of people. The first thing I'd like to do is give a framework for looking at this issue. A healthy community with diverse household types will provide housing to meet a diversity of household and community needs. So diverse household types, things like youth and seniors and singles and couples, and needs like affordability and mobility and access to community resources. Community needs like environmental protection, if you know the wood smoke that in this town and issues like that. I'd like to move on from there and say, well, what's the focus of this process of looking at the community this way? Well, it's to look at gaps. So to look at issues where these needs for household types and for the community aren't being met. And I've given some example issues here, which I suppose is the goal, but obviously this group has to flesh those issues out. Things like affordability for low and middle income people in this town. I'll digress here. I got a little paper from Judy Gayton, who a lot of you will know about 10 minutes ago. The median income for families in this community is $40,000. If you go to the bank with that kind of income, you basically have to get a house. You can buy a house for about $100,000, and right now there's 4 of them for sale, I think, in this area. So that's the median income. That means half of the families in this community can't buy a house unless they want to buy one of those 4. This is a calculation about affordability. What we want people to think about is what are the consequences of these things not happening. People move out of town and as a result can't contribute to their community in sustainable ways, or people stay in town and spend too much money on their housing and there's social costs involved and there's stresses on the community and all those sorts of things. There's a group of other issues, I won't go into them in great detail, but special needs of seniors and the disabled, another major issue in this community, particularly seniors. Security needs for youth at risk, and the social costs of that are, I think, somewhat evident in this community. Affordability for single-parent families. The average, let's be honest, single moms with kids. A lot of people in this situation in the community are putting over half of their gross income into their housing. What are the ramifications, the long-term ramifications for this community? So these are all housing issues. And the third thing I'd like to do is sort of the rally cry about this issue. A community concerned with its sustainability recognizes that it has power through community organization and through the municipal governing bodies, and this is an important part of this issue, to meet housing needs, to do something about it. And a digression from that, I guess, is that the free market won't meet these needs, and the community must rally behind the issue to meet them and achieve the goals of diversity in housing, which is a prerequisite for a sustainable community. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Trish Janelle. She's our very own Nelson City planner, and she's going to be talking about population densities and utilities.
Hi, I'd actually like to also just mention briefly about transportation too. The Transportation Focus Group decided not to meet prior to this meeting, and there's good reason for that. The City of Nelson has a consultant that's presently working on a transportation strategy. And the strategy is comprehensive in nature and does consider regional transportation issues. As the strategy will be available for use in the final report of Nelson Area 2020, it makes sense to leave the transportation for the time being and concentrate our efforts on other issues that are not being extensively reviewed. So the transportation strategy will be presented to City Council next week, and the consultant will then prepare a draft which will be ready for public consultation in February. At that time, the committee responsible for the transportation strategy would welcome the comments and suggestions of anyone interested from this project. So that's that. The population density focus group, we met in December, and one of our members brought up the quotation, "Ecological land uses are the foundation of building a healthy human habitat." And that quotation really helped us sort of focus our minds on sort of coming up with the goal statement for the population densities, and as well as discussing some of our issues. So the goal statement we came up with is, future land use should determine population densities that ensure and enhance our present quality of life. These land uses are based on a set of ethics and values that recognize and limit the impact of human activity on the environment, economy, and social structure. We discussed 5 issues in our meeting. The first being green space requirements. That's talking about sort of new possibilities like rooftop gardens, establishing green spaces in the existing downtown, protection of waterfront access. Second issue is the carrying capacity for the area, and one of the big sort of questions is what are the limiting factors of Nelson, and even what is the carrying capacity? What is carrying capacity? So those are things that need to be addressed. The third issue we talked about was septic system and water limitation. We actually neatly skirted that issue by saying, well, the water quality focus group's going to talk about that one. So. But it is an important issue. We made mention of it. The fourth issue is target areas in Nelson where increased density is possible, feasible, and desirable. Things like defining high density in Nelson. How do we increase density while maintaining the quality of our life here? And the final issue we discussed was viewscape. That's things like the natural surroundings, including the forest areas that are privately owned, our cityscape and preserving our heritage nature of the city, the visual impact as one enters our city from the North Shore and Salmo and Dagenham, preserving the viewscapes in new developments so that new developments aren't too large to destroy what existing development, the views they already have. And that sort of covers what the viewscape issue is. And then our closing little comment was, in sustainable communities, we are all agreed on how we will use our land and community land. We can no longer use the excuse, it's my land and I'll do with it what I please. There we go.
Next we'll have Margaret Krumka to talk about the arts and culture sector.
Hi. When I sat down to talk about arts and culture, I knew I was coming at it from my own bias because I work at the Kootenai School of the Arts, and I think it's a wonderful place to work, and I hope the school thrives and flourishes. So, with that in mind, sure. I didn't want to stand up here and do a lot of convincing about why I thought arts and culture was a sector that should be valued, but anyways, I'll say some things that I think are givens and we'll go from there. Nelson, I think, has an image provincially and nationally as a small town cultural center, and the value of this image is I think, under-recognized and has a huge impact on this area's economy. So that is something I think a strategic plan should look at and consider. And then when I say the word community in the rest of my talk, I'm referring to our responsibility as a community, governments, our individual responsibility, participating groups' responsibility, and so on. And when I refer to artists, I'm talking about fine artists, craftspeople, artisans, musicians, performers, writers, and everything under the gamut. So first off, I thought an issue that needed to be addressed was the need for public art in government buildings, offices, businesses, outdoor spaces. It's great that the Wild Onion has regular shows circulating, but it'd be wonderful to see a big John Cooper hanging in the Kootenai Place or something like that. Annual events like Art Walk and the Kootenai Christmas Craft Fair should be and continue to be supported. The community needs a large concert venue. Last night's Ani DeFranco concert proves what, how much energy this community has for those events. And just imagine having a space to bring in the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra or even Pearl Jam on the other side of things. That'd be a huge draw. The community also needs a local high-end arts and crafts gallery. It's open for discussion whether it should be public or for profit. I vote for profit. I think it'd be a good, big economic boon. The value of arts and culture needs to be made available to people who are financially constrained. I don't know if that's jargon or not, but it has been perceived as a luxury item, and it's a shame that in our community, youth, seniors, and underemployed people are excluded from programs. I know the Garage, for example, has tried repeatedly to bring in arts programming, and it's just out of their affordability to hire a KSA qualified teacher to teach there. So there needs to be some looking at that. And there's a need to enhance arts programs and culture programs in schools to move beyond teaching painting and drawing as grade 12 art and move into other creative mediums like clay or textiles, woodworking, and so on. And we need architecture to support and continue to support Nelson's sort of arts image. In our discussion in forming these ideas, we were talking about the possibility of a hotel at the bottom of Hall Street. And I said, God, just imagine a 35-story Sandman down there. And Maureen, in her wisdom, said, well, wouldn't it be nicer if we had something like the Heritage Inn? And I think this community can work together to bring something like that about. Arts and culture education, like Kootenai School of the Arts, Selkirk College, music program and fine woodworking program needs to be continued and enhanced. That's my little plug. And finally, at the bottom, my last item is that artists need to be valued. I don't think there needs to be a Hug an Artist Day instigated or anything like that, but I think anytime there's I just felt embarrassed. I was just talking with Sandy Corman, and she's throwing pots again, and I said, well, you should give me one of your cups. And I thought, God, why would I ask her to give me a cup? I should give her $10 for it. Yeah, she said she would, but it's the common thing that artists should donate their work, and I think that's a problem that we have to address and overcome. Thank you very much.
And now from the social community, also speaking on arts and culture, Andy Grace, who many of you will know as the coordinator of Art Walk for the last number of years. Anne, would you come up, please?
Hi, I'm fairly new to this planning process, but I'm not new to arts in the community. It's one of my first loves. I've been involved in the arts for about 10 years here. I was asked by Lorraine to come and just talk about arts from a heart point of view, which isn't hard at all. For me, it's like trying to explain why you want to bring up your kids in the best manner possible. You don't just want to maintain them, you want to nurture and inspire growth. And that's what you want to do with the arts, because you know that you reap what you sow, and you know there's no question of the ultimate value of something like that. It's intrinsic to our identity. I was pleased to hear Corky say, that what we are is our most valuable resource, and I believe that the arts is very important to what we are. When we describe Nelson to a visitor, we identify, along with the scenery and the heritage, its terrific art scene, and we say it with a certain pride. Art's been considered, is considered a measurement of civilization, and so we can pat ourselves on the back that we have a strong arts community, and therefore we must be a very civilized bunch. I think that's pretty important. That strong knowledge of who we are is what gives Nelson the personality we cherish. We talk about a quality of life, and this is a very big part of it. For decades, the arts were considered a high society thing, as Margaret mentioned, something held together by volunteers who were often wives of wealthy businessmen. Well, obviously society's changed, and arts has become far more universal, and it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain the arts through volunteers who must also earn a living. And what the arts has to work with usually is the occasional employment grant and one-shot handout for funding. When Margaret mentioned Hug an Artist Day, the first thing that came to mind was Pay an Artist Day. I like that idea. And we know that arts play an important role in Nelson's economy. As part of the community personality, the arts are used to attract new business and investment. But if the value is difficult to measure, it's undoubtedly there because it's more than money. It's who we are. We're fortunate to have a facility such as the Capitol Theatre. Its proposed expansion is something the community should get behind wholeheartedly. The Kootenai School of the Arts is a success story, but ongoing community support remains essential to its future. Facilities for dance performance and large-scale events are something we should be considering. Certainly a professional quality public gallery space is essential for the visual arts. When I believe we host the BC Festival of the Arts, it's going to be a tight squeeze to figure out where we're going to put all these venues, and that's a really important thing for this community. There's no question that the arts are becoming increasingly recognized for the important part they play and an element of our community makeup that must be maintained and enhanced as we strive to shape Nelson towards the coming decades. The question I'd like to ask in leaving is, we can't underestimate the importance of beauty. And if we had the power to plan a community from scratch, just starting with the very basics, how could we ever leave out art? Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Now, Elaine Chernoff is going to speak to us. She's also on the Social Community Planning Group, and she's going to speak to us about governance, partnerships, and community-based health.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the people on my team as a subcommittee. Jean Spratley with as a senior citizens counselor and formerly Seniors One Stop coordinator. Lena Horswell, who isn't here, Executive Director of Community Services. I'm Elaine Chernoff. I'm presently the Healthy Communities Coordinator for the City of Nelson, known as the Youth Issues Project. That's my plug. And 3 years as the Healthy Schools Coordinator with the Central Kootenai Union Board of Health. I don't want to read to you, and you all have a copy of this. If yours doesn't look like this. It's called Developing Partnerships and Governance. And our philosophy when we started working on this to keep us on track was to keep referring to quality of life. I'm going to start my presentation with a couple questions to assist you in thinking and motivating you to sign up. And the questions: why effective partnerships and governance are important during Nelson's anticipated growth? Why do we need a strategy? And how can a proposed social planning council provide a structure to existing agencies and governments to encourage working partnerships? And when I talk about working partnerships, I'd like to elaborate and call that a relationship. Starting with the partnership issue. For an example, what does interagency competition mean? My personal experience and others on the subcommittee is that there's only so many dollars in those ministry pockets from Victoria. and we're all scrambling to access that funding, and we may not be working together to address the same needs in the community. And those ministries include Ministry of Health, Social Services, Attorney General. As far as a need, this may be a perceived need or a felt need, the mechanism that needs to be created will allow for mutual exchange of information amongst service agencies. And that means, what are your mandates, what are your responsibilities, who's your focus group, youth, seniors, adults, whoever. And then the partnership issue leads directly into governance, and governance is also a partnership. City Council and Regional District does not have an organized or formal group to consult regarding community social issues. Presently, there's no community-wide focus on social issues. The focus is on a single group. We'll use housing as an example. There's a need for affordable housing for youth, for seniors, for single-parent families, and why can't we another strategic plan or feasibility study to include all low and middle income residents? As far as the need, City Council and Regional District needs to access social planning resources and to develop an official social plan, and an ultimate goal would certainly be to hire a social planner. As an example, the Social Planning Council can work with New Directions and the Health Council. I like to use the word watchdog, but I was consulted not to use that kind of terminology. As far as the volunteer agency, one of the things that we discussed was the pool of people for not just the Social Planning Council, but any kind of committee work. I look at faces in this room, and I know a lot of people from other committee work that I do, and volunteers get exhausted too. And as examples, we'll refer back to New Directions, because there's a lot of media stuff about New Directions, and we really felt that New Directions may not view social issues as health issues, and we as a Social Planning Council may be able to watchdog, to make sure that their goal is similar to our goal, which is community-based health. And then other examples that the proposed Social Planning Council can address, assist community-based policing, Economic Development Commission, Community TV, and community housing. And if anyone has any questions about some of the information that I didn't verbalize, I'll be standing over there. Thank you for your time.
Before I introduce Carol Joy, I just wanted to remind you about the time, so if you could try to keep to 2 minutes. Carol Joy Walker was going to speak about health and alternative health, but I'm not sure I've seen her. She's not here. Do we have her statement? Somebody else could read it?
She's not healthy.
She's healthy. She's sick. Is it here? I don't think so.
Okay. Maybe we'll
I'll
just...
check and...
Okay, we'll put it down towards the end. In that case, perhaps Wendy, you wouldn't mind if I introduced from the Physical Subcommittee, John Alton, to speak about air quality and pollution.
Hi, I'm John Alton, and with air quality, I'm a one-person committee. Hope to grow, because I feel really strongly about air quality, and for me to have a vision for the future, it would be to have clean air to breathe for everyone, and that's inside and outside. And I don't feel personally that we're here right now in Nelson, that my vision is not being lived. I deal with air pollution every day, I feel. My purpose would be to ensure clear air. Thanks. Inside public places, restaurants, and I don't know about bars, that's touchy. And I want to tread on that turf. And outdoors for all living organisms, not only us humans, but there's all these other organisms out there. So the issues that I see are auto emissions, and I know there's an air care program in place in the Lower Mainland, and maybe that's provincial. It's an issue that could be looked at. These yard burning, inefficient wood fire heating, powerboat emissions, and indoor cigarette smoking in restaurants. I understand there's new environmental standards being put in place in British Columbia. They're adopting the US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency standards, so that's something to be looked at. Maybe there's some new standards coming in. I don't know. There's also air quality monitoring that takes place in Nelson right now. So those will be some of the issues that I would like to look at with people. I think I'm next.
Jake up too.
Huh?
Sure, why don't you just invite Jake up and two of you can do water quality.
Okay. Well, I was going to do water quality, but you can come on up if you want, Jake. Jake knows a lot more about water quality than I do. Right. So on that committee there was Bridget and Jake and Michael and Stacy, who's also sick. Water quality. Again, I feel strongly about the basics, air and water, clean water. That's a really important thing for us all in terms of sustainability, in terms of our health, our well-being. And our group felt like when we're talking about water quality, it's all kinds of water. It's drinking water, it's the water in the lakes, it's the water we use and then we put back into a natural state. So we feel like all aspects of water, we're looking at quality and not polluting with it and having clean water for us to drink. Our mission is pure and natural water is an essential right of our human and biotic community for present and also for future generations. Okay. So protecting the integrity of our water ecosystems is a responsibility which must guide all human activity affecting water quality and quantity. Okay. So water altered by human activity must be returned to the ecosystem in a pure state. So we looked at maintaining pure water through protecting the ecosystems, the watersheds. We'll be looking at septic fields, population densities, logging, watershed protection, pesticides, things like that. And then in water use, we would look at traffic on water, treatment of human waste on boats, emissions, chlorination, things like that. And then water restoration is the third area, where wastewater, sewage treatment. So to return the water to it in a natural state, a pure state to the environment so we don't pollute. Right, and then looking at governance. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, David Crampton is going to be talking about forestry practices, private land use, and wildlife.
This is one where they cheated. They put slashes beside everything to make one group.
It fits together, don't you think? This group tackled probably, well, an area that we think is fairly contentious in that it's one where we're in the midst of an enormous change. And I'd like to see this viewed as something about ethical relationships to the land and perhaps private land, forestry practices, visual quality, wildlife, all faces that same demand on it right now. And that is, how do we relate to our land and what is the ethical relationship that we have with it? As we move away from the exploitative component to something more sustainable, whatever that word really means in the end. And as much as Josh is pleading poverty, I think there probably are, as we skip into the next part of this, opportunities from the government initiatives that are coming through. For instance, what Corky has been putting forward for value added, for instance, the Forest Practices Code, the Forest Renewal and CORE, etc., are providing opportunities for the community
to engage itself in forest practices, whether they are the visual quality or the wildlife or water quality that was mentioned earlier. There are opportunities for the communities themselves to engage in that process. And it also means more than simply volunteerism. It does also allow us to make use of the funds that we pay in taxes that are coming back into this community in a large way. The goal statement that we have put together is to ensure existing and future land is compatible with maintaining functional ecosystems. Now, if sustainability is a confusing issue, I can assure you that functional ecosystems is just as confusing as to exactly what it is. I think it offers us a bit of a challenge for the future to define what that word really means, and that in itself is rather exciting. But it also means that we can move the paradigm that we're in today, that one of where we must exploit, into something that is sustainable by having to come to a grip and understanding of what functional ecosystems are really all about. The handout that is there breaks the topic that I'm looking at here, or we are looking at, into 5 different areas. But I'd suggest again that the private land use and forestry practices really are one and the same if you think about it from an ethical context. That is, that if what we are trying to promote through legislation in the forest industry, through the Forest Service, is an ethic, and we're having to utilize legislation to do that, the same sort of thing could be garnered into the private land use aspect also. And I think that behooves us to be a part of that process with land use in the private domain, in the public domain. That is, we supply and can provide opportunities for educating the people who have private land, who want to make use of their land for forestry purposes, how they may impact the visual community. I think we have a number of examples of how not to do that around town. I don't want to get too far into that. But there again, I think if the context was one of a community basis, that wouldn't have happened, if the ethic was there in the first place. So those forestry practices on private land and public land, I think, are linked through the ethical relationships. The forestry practices themselves are changing dramatically, probably faster than most of us can actually keep up with. And it really will, I think what we need to do is posit these changes in the community itself. What can we do? These are coming down as very large-scale changes into and onto our communities, and it's up to us to make them work for ourselves. And specifically, things like watershed protection, value-added planning that would occur here would be specific to the Nelson area. The planning, in particular, the landscape level planning that we're working with is again specific to the desires and demands of the people who live in this area. They'd be very different in another community altogether. And that landscape is something that takes us away from the individual stands, the individual landscape out of your front door, and into something much larger. And that includes the visual landscape itself. And finally, the wildlife component that is in that is not to be, I'm not sure how it ended up as such a small font on there as wildlife and private land use, but it shouldn't be. It should be just as large as anything else that's on there. The concepts of biodiversity, and it was talked earlier how the linkages with water quality are tied into fisheries enhancement for the people who live in this area are really key issues. Participation in the group, as far as we're concerned, doesn't require that you have some great expertise in any one of these areas. In fact, I think probably what you need are some ideas and a real desire to challenge the status quo. And that's the sort of individuals I think we want to have in our group. Thanks.
I'd like to introduce Ruth back to discuss the natural resources sector, including forestry, mining, and agriculture.
We were told to put these together. Well, David's done a really good introduction into a whole lot of issues related to forestry, and I guess just to say that the Economic Subcommittee also looked very seriously at all the natural resource industries, and in my little bit that you all can read about, we focused on value added as well, wanting some of the information coming out of the conference, because a lot of good input went into that. And basically, the thing that we want to look at are some specific things linked perhaps with some of the things that the small and medium-sized business sector is going to be looking at. what are emerging opportunities in value added, in other aspects of the forest-based economy. And so I'll just leave it at that, because I think David's dealt with a lot of the larger issues related to forestry, and we'll be fitting in, but taking an approach of looking at the economic aspect of it and how it all relates. With respect to mining, there was a need identified in phase 1 of this strategy for better education about mining, and I think on the receiving end of that, there's a lot of interest in the community in understanding what does sustainability mean in the context of mining, and what public education opportunities exist to share this information. And I've heard a member of the former Roundtable on Environment and Economy speak to this in the Elk Valley, and it's the first time I'd ever heard it, and it was really mind-opening to me to hear about how people are thinking about the 3 legs of the sustainability stool: social, environment, and economy, in the context of mining, and the things they're coming up with as solutions. And I think that through this project, I'd be really interested in working with, hopefully, John Murray and others to see if there's something that we can put together that will advance this public education process and have a strategy around that. Food and agriculture. I know John Alton is going to be dealing with this a bit later in the non-market sector, but it's a big issue. And in our discussion, there weren't many people who had a background in that area, so I think we may be looking for new members both tonight, and if you know other people in the community, this is probably a focus group that needs some boosting, because there's a lot of need for support for local agriculture, organic produce, taking a bioregional approach to where we get our food from, and just looking at some of the local purchase and value-added practices of all the different entities in the community involved with the food system. So, thank you.
I'm wondering if it feels more appropriate for me to talk now about agriculture than in non-market.
Why don't you? I think that's a good idea to follow.
That's what it feels like. So following along with air and water, I feel really the basics of food has to follow. And I feel really strongly, I've been thinking a lot about it, and I feel like self-sufficiency in terms of us providing ourselves with food is a real basis of sustainability and my vision for in the future, that we're not dependent on outside sources for food, for the quantity and the quality. And just lately, I guess there's been problems in Florida and stuff, and all of a sudden the prices go shooting up. I was reading in Vital Signs some statistics, world statistics, that of shrinking world food supply, the grain supplies are shrinking. So who knows in 20 years what will be happening. So I feel like the benefits of us enhancing our agriculture in the area are we have greater control over our own economy, that we're not dependent on outside economies. We control the quality and supply and the price more. We can diversify our economy base. We get a very stable market in ourselves, because food is something that we all have to buy every day. And it's a stable form of employment. It doesn't fluctuate much, because everybody again's got to buy food. Our money stays in the community. And again, we prepare, I feel, for sustaining ourselves in a world of shrinking food supplies. And some of the organizations that are already working to support self-sufficiency in agriculture, I feel, are the farmers market, which I feel could really use a boost and is not that well supported for what it is. CSA, the Community Supported Agriculture, that's happening at Lofstead Farm, and I know it's expanding. The Barter Bank and the Food Co-op are all ways of helping to market local produce, which is a real problem for local producers. How do you get it out to people? It doesn't go through great big stores. They don't want to take it often. So I think there's a lot of issues that could be, a lot that could be done to enhance our producing our own food. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce Bernadette Miles. She's from the Social Community Committee, and she will talk to us about community safety by community building.
Hi. There's so many neat issues out here. I kind of feel like I want to put my name on a whole bunch of these things. It's kind of overwhelming, all the neat ideas and the neat things that we could do in Nelson. I was warned by the rest of my committee that if I didn't say something sort of dramatic, that everybody would sort of take safety for granted, and so I was supposed to start out with something to get everybody's attention, I guess. I feel that that safety is something that we probably all take for granted a lot, especially in a place like Nelson, where it's so nice and it's so safe, and it's probably one of the reasons that a lot of us come here is because it's such a nice community. But I don't think it's a good idea for us to just take that for granted. I think that if we don't continue to work to build networks to communicate with each other, there's a tendency for communities to deteriorate. We felt that some of the safety issues were traffic safety, especially along the highway corridor through the city, home protection, personal protection, protection for unsupervised children after school, animal control, and protection from business scams. We felt that isolation is probably a problem for senior citizens, especially with changing societies when they don't always get up-to-date information. Quite often there's poor street lighting and children home from school alone after school. And these are sort of opportunities that can be taken advantage of by people who might not have the community's best interests at mind, at heart. So we wanted to just put across that by community building, we can protect the safety in Nelson, and to protect and ensure that Nelson is a safe and livable place for all residents, workers, and visitors is the goal that we hope to achieve. Thank you.
Next, I'd like Gord McAdams to come talk about waste management.
Thanks, Wendy. For waste management, we start with a very basic premise that before there's waste, there has to be consumption. Pretty simple. So we said we should take a very strong look in our own mirror. We believe that waste management is truly a lifestyle issue. We cannot become a sustainable community if we continue to produce and consume at current rates. Every farmer knows this. You can't eat more carrots than you can grow. And unless you clean out the barn once in a while, the stuff's going to pile up. And if you're really smart, you can take the stuff from the barn and put it in your garden and grow more carrots. That's basically what we're trying to get at for our waste management. Therefore, we said we should focus primarily on educating ourselves, on the awareness, more importantly on how we generate garbage, also as well as how we deal with the garbage, focusing more on the generating than on the dealing. Our Michael Recycle came up with an ounce of reduction is worth a pound of disposal. And he expanded our R's. And we now have 6 R's. And they're in order of priority. The current concerns facing us in managing solid waste, and we could also put liquid waste in there, I guess, too. Natural resources are limited, must be used sparingly. Space to dispose of this accumulated waste is increasingly short supply. The cost of disposal is becoming prohibitive, and the regulations tell us we got to literally get our stuff together. These are the actions or the issues that we sort of brainstormed. We're more than welcome to take any others. A lot of these are already in process by the regional district, the city, and province, and some other local initiatives. We'd like to offer ourselves as more willing horses to help pull the wagon, especially on the public awareness and the consumer education of generating the waste. Thank you.
Don Gayton, do you want to come up and talk about new sectors?
Well, I have to warn you that I chose this area because I don't know anything about it, so I figured it'd be a good way to learn. I also thought if I lost my job that I might get some tips and hints on other jobs to apply for. new businesses, new jobs, new sectors is one of the engines of the economy, and in this instance of Nelson, whose economy in transition, it is particularly important. The mystery of it all is how do you soup up that engine of innovation and new business creation, and that's a sort of a mysterious process, and I'm not sure that you can really, I'm sort of an anarchist at heart, and I'm not entirely convinced that we can do anything to enhance this development of new sectors and so on. However, I've read Jane Jacobs. I'm very curious about, I know that it's not a straightforward proposition to generate new businesses and new sectors. But certainly there are some obvious ones in the community of Nelson, and I think most of them probably logically spin off from existing industries, and that's kind of the classical methodology. Information services, data manipulation, storage, backup, software development, and so on, all that great realm of computer stuff. We obviously have major clients here for those kinds of services in government agencies. It seems like we have a lot of people coming from major urban centers who are bringing these interesting and exotic and esoteric skills with them. And one of the nice things about information services is it doesn't have to be, it's less and less tied to a particular location. So the fact that we're somewhat off the beaten track really shouldn't be a disadvantage. The environmental services, we have a strong existing base of forestry and environmental consultants, and I think that as we have an increasing set of regulations and so on about resource management, that there will probably be demand for more and more specialized skills in the area of environmental services. Another area that I would sort of tag as education and self-development services, that's another, we have a fairly well-established cottage industry, if you will, in Nelson of alternative therapists, personal development trainers, alternative schools, and so on. The demand for that kind of training is likely to increase in the future. Nelson has a bit of a reputation as not being totally satisfied with the status quo, and it has drawn these kinds of people. Tourism services, you know, the idea of adventure tourism, ecotourism, and the other kinds of hyphenated tourism we probably have never thought of yet, but they're out there. Arts and crafts, as we heard earlier, the artists are standing up and being counted, and we're recognizing that there's more to art than just painting pictures, and there's a whole realm out there. The organic food production, wildcraft is mentioned, film and video is another area. So I would be intrigued in just exploring these areas and seeing if we could possibly put our finger on what it is that causes these innovations to occur. Thanks.
Jean Spratley is another very active member of our Social Community Committee, and she's going to speak about mobility and transportation.
This too is a committee of one. Quality of life means that all people are able to move about freely. It means there's a recognition of the need to build upon the services already developed to create a more supportive environment for those with limited physical abilities. And issue number one, in spite of our current weather, is snow and ice on city sidewalks. And this is hazardous for everyone, but it's particularly so for the disabled and for seniors. People are unable to get out to exercise and to socialize, and that very often leads to health problems. And this is the issue that comes up the most frequently for the Seniors Advisory Committee to City Council. And the second issue is that some public buildings are not accessible, and Number 3 are the transportation issues. Schedules do not meet the needs of people with physical limitations, especially weekends and late evenings. This means that the disabled have to lean heavily on their family and they're unable to be independent, which is what they really wish. No bus service at all in the Blewett area, so it's good to know that that issue is being addressed. And no schedules at the bus stops or other means of determining when buses are due. There are some other mobility issues emerging as a result of a survey being conducted by the Stepping Stones project in partnership with the Recreation Commission, and this information will be shared with the Mobility Focus Group. There are many ideas. This was rather a last-minute one, and there's more information to come. And lots of ideas, for example, using the Boys and Girls Club to do some of the sidewalk clearing. So we need a strategy to put some of these ideas into action. Thank you.
Introduce yourself. Oh, right, because Tricia's gone.
Hyphenated tourism?
Yeah. Ruth says I'm here to talk about hyphenated tourism. My topic is outdoor recreation and tourism, and I start off with some general statements, none of which are complete. There's lots missing here. It's just scratching the surface. Currently, Nelson and area offers a spectacular natural resource with countless outdoor recreation and tourism possibilities, and we all know that because we all partake in them. The community is also host to numerous recreation-oriented clubs who include among them many trained, enthusiastic personnel who are willing to share their expertise and enthusiasm. The outdoor recreation sector promotes healthy lifestyles as well as a healthy regard for the natural environment and all living things. Nelson and area has a very strong identity provincially and beyond as a beautiful heritage community. Some of the issues that face this sector, however, include resource use conflicts on the land, lack of readily available information on outdoor recreation opportunities in the area, more particularly from the perspective of the visitor to our community. Again, the question of the capacity of the land base as we look to the future and planning a tourism industry for our community. Lack of local operators selling inbound tourism experiences and packages. Not that we don't have them, it's just that we don't have very many. Lack of tourism training facilities from an education perspective. The seasonability of the tourism sector is always a problem. And the need to identify our attractions, resources, and market them more effectively. We don't have a marketing strategy for Nelson. That's a problem for our community. Ecotourism is certainly a strong trend in the tourism sector. We have a lack of ecotourism products from the money-making point of view. The product, the scenery, the landscape is all there, and we're not potentially making use of it as we could. This sector can contribute very much to the diversity of Nelson and area's economy. And I would encourage anyone who'd be interested in working with me to discuss some of these issues and more to come sign up on my sheet.
Max Shaw has been very active on the social community committee as well, but he's ill this evening, and he was going to do the report on education and information, so I will just take a moment and read it to you. Number 1, the future control of material benefits belong to those who can discern between information that is trash and information that is useful. To accomplish this difficult task, access to the widest range of existing knowledge is necessary. The library could evolve into such a resource center, but lack of technology presently blocks the door. 2, youth need befitting apprenticeships, mentorships, especially in job areas where such training is normally not the case. Example, alternative healers, equipment operators, marital arts, craft people, foresters, and social service. You can tell that Max has been a real delight on the... It hasn't been all work, we've had some fun. 3, a need for more advanced education opportunities is present, perhaps focusing on forestry, ecology, or the arts. 4, holistic education includes a need for recreational activities that can be done readily and cheaply throughout a whole life. 5, lifelong learning is a necessity, and a major key to its success is affordable public computer education and access to the Internet informational highway. 6, there is a need to inform folks about the critical role art plays in community spirit and spirituality. 7, legal education for youth would inform them of their right responsibilities as well as increase understanding of legal traditions. 8, school resources should be shared with the community. Thank you.
Okay, we're down to the last two sectors to discuss. I'd like to ask Lori Langford to come and talk about education and training.
That's a good sign, everybody.
So we've reached the end of the presentations, but only the beginning of most of the work, I would imagine, or a lot of the work for the action part. I took part in the economic sector and ended up in the discussion for presentation on health and education. And actually, Carol Joy Walker was going to present the health portion. So if you bear with me, probably the first thing I would like to remark on is I seem to be the only person who didn't represent my literature in linear fashion. And so for those of you who haven't picked it up yet, I might just address that. One of the things that seemed to come up while we were endeavoring to allow input from everyone and develop a process for recording all the information that was coming out, because it kept, there was no way to manage it as if change can be managed. And so there was real reluctance amongst any group where discussion was taking place for anyone to be the note taker, because there was just this constant barrage of stuff and people feeling desperate that they were going to miss something. And this particular system of recording information is something that I've done over the last few years, which is mostly to do with mapping and not assign any importance to anything above anything else by listing it. And also it gets lost in your pages and pages of notes. And it's been interesting to me to be the one that follows at the end because of the integrated and overlap that has been reoccurring in the themes of the presentations. And we suspected that that might happen even within our small group as we began to lay it out on the page. One of the things that also came up was the lack of language to describe some of the things that we were approaching, and reluctance to use words we already have in our vocabulary. Things such as people have resources, but they aren't resources. So if we're moving into a human-centered economy, then we have to deal more with human relations than human resources. So anybody with human resource management on their door might be a bit of a dinosaur. Something to know from our history is that you have to sort of change or perish, that there's no written laws that communities survive. We know that from the past, the evolution moving from a mining community to a ski industry, for instance, is a real huge wall of change to overcome. And it was, I think Corky's story pointed that out very well for those of us who have lived the last decade or more in this community to even witness the changes that we've gone through and the acceleration of change. So in education, some of the major themes that we had were access, access to education across all levels, ability, generation, gender, cultural, funding, sources of funding, the evolving question of government funding versus individual purchasing of educational services and private training, corporate sponsors in education and the directions that those might take us in. In both health and education, the young gentleman from the Advocacy Center mentioning that consumer-driven change for most of these fundamental social issues as far as diversity don't come from the private enterprise sector. They do need governance or guidance from government as far as policy. So rather than goal, I will just say that at the bottom of each of the pages, what we came up with a guiding principle for change. So in education, the guiding principle for change in all of our educational institutions, and there are many papers been written recently in this area on education, is that it's an opportunity to educate for citizenry. And maybe it addresses what David Crampton was saying too. Maybe what we're struggling for is some idea of the ethics that will govern the decisions that we make as we self-direct into the future, and that those are our choices to make about what we value, about how we live. And that school system may be a place to consider doing that, that in democracies you need citizen literacy in how to be a good citizen, in how best to participate in your community. And so that's the guiding principle of change, with many other subjects touched on. And I didn't at first, when I was going to do this, see any relationship to health and education, but I did speak to Carol Joy Walker on the phone before agreeing to present this for her, and she was saying that that's also a place where health, for those of you who went to school in my generation, TB testing, sight and hearing testing, immunization programs, etc. Public health systems were very closely in the past linked with our public education systems. So the guiding principle for change that we came up with in health was wellness and contributions to quality and length of life, recognizing that economic prosperity doesn't always make for healthy individuals or groups. And that also came under topics of discussion such as funding, access, resources, places where health care is taking place, the decentralization, and also, again, major studies going on about the funding and the securing of it as an access to everyone situation. So did I take my 2 minutes, I hope? Because it's big.
I did say 2 remaining sectors, so I would like to introduce Ruth Beck to talk about the financial, non-market, and retirement sector.
Yeah, just before I do that, it was interesting hearing Laurie talk about just saying that economic well-being isn't necessarily so important to your own health, and it's so different talking about issues of economic sustainability and its relation to human health in a context of a society where we're over-consumers, as opposed to, in my field, which is international development, looking at countries where you have to look at the root causes of the economic self-sufficiency of a community to look at why people are dying. And so we're looking at it in a really different societal context. Now, my given topic is to talk about the financial sector. And again, I think we'll probably be involving some people who aren't here today, but who have taken part in the past, people who work at a number of the different banks and credit union in town. Wanted to look at methods of equity financing, including new and innovative ones that are gaining currency, shall we say. Things like community venture capital corporations, things like ethical investments, and broadly speaking, how could we incorporate social and community goals into the policies and practices of financial institutions, and finding out what's happening now. I'm personally pretty ignorant of it, but interested in it. And so looking at opportunities for proactive financial institution policy. And we recognized that we did need some information to be able to do this, and we did need to link with people who worked in that sector. So that's what we'll be doing there. Now that was the last presentation about the issues, and so basically, you know, we've actually done really well. It's been about 2 hours since I convened this meeting, and we had pretty long introduction. So I think people have really stuck to their time well, and obviously people are pretty keen because you're hanging in. And what I'd like to do now is, in advance of the sign-up session, which we're about to begin, I'd like to adjourn the official public meeting for Shaw Cable and others so that we can sort of experience our chaos in the privacy of our own library. And so moving on to sign-up, I'm going to get Lorraine to introduce this a little bit more. Oh no, I can do that, can't I? I can do it. So I'm to remind you to sign up as if I need to. And as Lorraine has mentioned before, decide what days you want to meet, and you know that there are some resources here at the library to be able to meet different times, both at noon hour and in the evening. And go and enter those dates and times on the calendar with Linda. And it's really important that you do a couple things. One is choose that contact person. That's because the Johnson Group have information that they need to hand out to the focus groups, and they need to have a real easy way of doing that now that they're going to be working with 20+ groups. It's a real task for our consulting team. Also, recognize that some of these groups are going to form really well tonight, and others are we're going to be identifying gaps, both where we feel that we would like to have greater participation in a particular focus group, and you may even have some people in mind, and start identifying sort of creative ways of incorporating them. You know, if they can't come to all the meetings, maybe work around a long lunch to incorporate the views of someone you think has some really critical input. Also, if there are gaps, and there's one that I've talked about a few times, which is I'd love to sit down with some city administrative personnel and ask them what are some areas where they see changes in policy and practice being able to be achievable. But if you have any others that you've identified, either tonight or as the focus group develops, please let the Johnson Group know, because we're all at the steering committee and through the focus groups looking for creative ways of filling out this whole project, okay, as it comes to pass. So, I guess without further ado, stand up and sign up.